Hello everyone and welcome back to our discussion on mountains. Last time we talked about the types of mountains and some of the conditions in high altitude. This time we're going to get into more detail on high altitude and what it does to people. So let's get right into it. So what's it like up there high up in the mountains? So the higher your elevation or the higher the altitude, the less there is in terms of pressure and amount of gas molecules. You can see in this diagram here that there's less atoms as you get to around 8,000 meters, and that means that when you're trying to breathe, it gets really difficult at high altitudes. And that's why you tend to spasm and have symptoms of extreme fatigue in high altitudes, even if you're not actually physically exhausted. It's because you're actually not getting enough oxygen into your body. Okay? Now, this is another thing that varies with elevation. As you go higher, the temperature also changes. So this temperature is in degrees Fahrenheit. So when you're around sea level, it should be around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And as you gain altitude, the temperature decreases because there is less energy within the air. There's less gas molecules to carry that kinetic energy as temperature. So it gets colder and it gets harder to breathe the higher you go up. So what about people? What happens to them in the extreme heights, in extreme altitudes? So in the short term, it's called altitude sickness. Generally, people have feelings of fatigue, exhaustion, and so on. So over a period of days or weeks, this extreme fatigue, this sickness, this nausea will tend to diminish because the body will adjust to the changes in the conditions. So this adjustment is called acclimatization. So your body can acclimate to a certain set of conditions. In particular, for high altitude, your body starts to get used to it. Gets used to the low amount of oxygen, the low amount of air pressure, the low temperatures. But that's only if you actually survive your period of altitude sickness. So the case in point is that we do need oxygen. And at a certain point, there's not enough oxygen for people to be able to live for extended periods of time. And this zone is called the death zone. It's any elevation above 8,000 meters. So there's only a short span of time where humans can try to survive in that kind of environment because they will never be able to acclimate to that environment. So where are mountains found? If we're going to look at the map of the world, is there a pattern to where mountains are found? So here's the map of the world with the mountains in different colors so that you can see the high mountains, the low mountains, and so on. So as you can see in this cute little map, on the left side, there is the United States and the others on that continent, the American continent, with most of the mountains on the coast. The same with Africa and the same with Asia. You see most of the mountain ranges near the coasts. Or there are lines that you see in between the certain countries or islands. So again, there are particular lines or mountain ranges that are visible. So it does seem to form a certain pattern. That pattern is a consequence of, again, the movement of things on Earth's surface. So it's your turn now. You have to figure out a distribution map for our local region. Zooming into the Philippines, there are resources online that will allow you to see a more clear map of the Philippines and to see if there are any patterns with how our mountains are arranged. In particular, I want you to identify mountain ranges and how they are spread out throughout our country and in the local region, the Southeast Asian region. So just to end the topic, the question is, why should we care about mountains? If they really are just piles of rock and soil, what's the point of them in our lives? So the significance of mountains and why they matter more than me as a person matters is because of certain features that mountains have. So here we have a few examples of mountains. So first off, we have the geological insight from mountains. What this means is that the mountains give us clues about what happens on Earth's surface over a span of time longer than our own lifetimes. So the folding on this left side is showing clues that perhaps the Earth's surface, even though it's solid, even though it's rigid, it can fold over many, many eons or many, many years. The same with other types of landforms or types of mountains. We can see patterns that give us clues as to how the world works or as to how the Earth moves. So how do mountains affect life then? Can mountains affect life? Mountains themselves are not alive, of course, but how many species live on them? So just look at this picture of a mountain scenery. How many biomes can you make out? So you can see in the background there's a very cold biome. Here in the foreground there's some sparse tree vegetation. There's more trees, specifically conifers here in the extreme foreground. So there's lots of biomes. There's maybe 3 or 4 biomes in that picture alone. And then when you go hiking, you'll actually be able to come upon borders between actual biomes. It's like you're stepping into another world. And the point is that in mountains, based on elevation, based on separation because of valleys, you get many types of biomes. And when you get many types of biomes, these are different, multiple habitats, all condensed into a small area. In other words, your mountains are biodiversity hotspots. Because of the different elevations and the different climates, you have many different ecosystems, which results in a high concentration of species in a relatively small area. There's lots of rare species that you can see in mountain regions. Okay? So they contain more than half of the entirety of the world's catalog of known species. They're mostly found in mountainous regions. But what about us personally? We're selfish creatures. We don't really care about anything if it doesn't affect us. For people, what are mountains? Are they just something that we can clamber on top of? Is it some sort of hobby, toy thing? Not really. See, here we have some ores in the background. So the best place to find these is, in fact, in mountainous regions. So you have resource industries that are based in mountains. So ores, minerals, rocks, the things that you can get from the earth are in high concentration in mountains because specifically mountains are upcroppings or the rising of earth, so that those that are buried deep beneath the earth are technically around sea level or somewhere above ground level. It becomes easier to reach things that used to be buried deep beneath the earth once before. Okay, so we have many precious metals and precious minerals that we can get from mountain resource industries. Next is also agriculture and foraging. So harvesting things that can grow. Now, usually agriculture sounds really nice, but it can still be damaging. So comparing that with the resource industries, again, it costs the environment. If you can see in the background, the mountains are naked. There are no forests there anymore. There's no life there anymore. The same with agriculture and foraging. Though it looks nice and though you're growing life, it is artificial life. It's not the same biodiversity as nature intended. It's just 1 or 2 crops, just a few crops that humans would want for eating or for growing into textiles, textile materials. So it's still technically damaging to nature and the balance of nature. So how else do we see mountains? Are they just something that we can get stuff from? Are they just mounds to us that we can just steal resources from? So these are 3 examples of mountains that have more than just resources to offer, more than just something to clamber on top of. So Mount Horeb, for example, Mount Horeb is actually what is considered the actual Mount Sinai from the Bible. Mount Fuji has many references to it as being a sacred mountain that is filled with sacred spirits in Japanese lore or in folklore. Mount Olympus, of course, has the history of being known as the home of the gods. Supposedly in Greek mythology, Mount Olympus is where the gods reside. So in common, they are sacred to us. These mountains that tower above us have a special connotation to our culture and to our beliefs. Because they are much bigger than us, they give a clue to us that perhaps we're not big ourselves. Perhaps there really is something that is greater than us, or perhaps someone greater than us. The case in point is that mountains remind us that we are human, and we are the only species capable of finding meaning, sentient enough to find meaning, and reason to believe in something greater than us in towering mountains of rock. And that is our discussion on mountains. If you have any questions, of course, we can talk about that in our Zoom sessions, or you can message me in Messenger or through Edmodo. So I'll see you guys in our next lesson topic next week. See you guys.